I had already pulled out of the driveway when I realized I'd left my laptop charger on the kitchen counter. Third time this month. My husband used to tease me about it. You'd forget your own name if it wasn't on your work badge. And honestly, he wasn't wrong. I made a U-turn at the end of our street and pulled back in through the garage, which was quieter than the front door and faster. It was 7:52 on a Tuesday morning in October. Cold, gray, the kind of Denver morning where the mountains disappear behind cloud cover and the city feels smaller than it is. My husband's car was still in the garage. He didn't have a client call until 9, and I figured I'd be in and out in 2 minutes. Grab the charger, steal a second cup of coffee, be back on the road before traffic thickened. I came in through the side door into the mudroom. His voice reached me before I even got to the kitchen. He was on the phone in his home office, just off the hallway. The door wasn't fully closed. I could hear him clearly, that low, measured voice he uses when he's talking about money. Deliberate, precise. The final block is scheduled for 3, he said. If there are no holds, it clears by end of business today. A pause, then laughter, familiar and bright, unmistakable, my sister's laugh. So by tonight, she said, she won't have anything left to fight over. I stopped moving. Not a dollar. My husband's voice was almost cheerful. She'll see the account balance eventually. But by then, there'll be nothing to trace. Everything's already routed through the offshore structure I set up in March. What if she calls the bank? She won't. She never looks at the investment accounts. That was the whole point. She trusts me with the finances, always has. I don't remember deciding to leave. I remember being back in my car, charger forgotten, hands on the wheel, not moving. The garage door was still open. I sat there for exactly 63 seconds. I know because I stared at the clock on the dashboard the whole time. 7:54, 7:55. Then I backed out and drove to work. I want to tell you I was calm. I want to say I was already 3 steps ahead, the way they show it in movies when the protagonist has one of those crystalline moments of clarity. That's not what happened. What happened was that I drove 11 miles to my office on autopilot and sat in the parking garage for 20 minutes before I could make myself go inside. My name is on my office door. I've spent 8 years at this company closing deals that matter, and I've done it while being someone's wife, someone's daughter, someone's older sister, someone's everything. And sitting in that parking garage, I understood, maybe for the first time with complete cold clarity, that my husband had been counting on exactly that. On all of it. On the fact that I was too busy being everyone else's person to notice what was being done to mine. By the time I got to my desk, I had a number in my head. My grandfather had died 14 months ago. He'd left me a trust, $2.3 million, vested in full when I turned 32. My husband had been there the night I got the estate paperwork. He'd offered to handle the beneficiary updates, since I was already overwhelmed with the funeral arrangements and a project deadline at work. I'd handed him a folder of documents and said thank you. I love you. I don't know what I'd do without you. I called my estate attorney from my office landline at 9:17 a.m. She didn't let me finish my sentence. When did you last look at your investment portfolio? She asked. I don't know, a few months ago. My husband manages. Log in right now, while I'm on the phone with you. I did. The balance was $498,000. 14 months ago, that account had held $2.3 million. She told me to freeze the account immediately. She walked me through it step by step. Freeze, fraud flag, do not contact anyone in the household, do not go home. She was already dialing the financial crimes unit before we hung up. She told me to go somewhere safe and stay there. I hung up and stared at the Denver skyline through my office window for a long time. Then I opened my email and responded to 3 pending client contracts like nothing had happened. Here's what I didn't understand until much later. I had been the perfect mark because I had never once thought of myself as one. I was the responsible one, the organized one, the daughter who paid her taxes early and kept her car maintained and always knew exactly where her passport was. I had built my entire adult identity around competence, around being someone who did not make naive mistakes. My husband had seen that, and he had used it against me. I met him 6 years ago at a fundraiser for a children's hospital downtown. He was funny and self-deprecating in a way that felt real. He asked questions and listened to the answers. Actually listened, which is rarer than people think. On our second date, he remembered something I'd mentioned in passing on the first, that my father had worked construction to put me through college, and he asked a follow-up question about it. That was the thing. The remembering. It disarmed me completely. We got engaged after 18 months. My father shook his hand at the engagement dinner and smiled, but I noticed he went quiet for the rest of the evening. On the drive home, he said only, "He's a lot of polish for a Tuesday." My father is a man of precisely 7-word critiques. I laughed it off, told him he was protective, that no one would ever be good enough for me in his eyes. My father was right. My husband was performing steadiness with borrowed materials. His financial advisory firm had barely 2 real clients when we met, and he'd been slowly rebuilding after a complaint was filed against him at a previous firm, something I didn't discover until months into our relationship. When he disclosed it as a story about a vindictive former employer and an unfair process, I believed him. I had no reason not to, and I was in love, which gives people extraordinary abilities to arrange facts into the story they want to be true. After we married, he took over our combined finances almost immediately. It made sense at the time. He was the professional. I was relieved to hand over the spreadsheets. He was good at performing reassurance. "Your money is safe with me, sweetheart." That's literally what I do. And when my grandfather died and the trust vested, he helped me with the paperwork. That was the moment everything actually began. I understand that now. My sister and I had been close once, genuinely close, the way sisters are when they're the only 2 people in a family who share the same private jokes and the same complicated grief. We had the same mother, who died when I was 15 and she was 11. We had the same father, who held things together with remarkable steadiness, but could never quite fill all the spaces she left behind. My sister was the artistic one, the one people called charming, the one who didn't get the same grades but lit up every room she walked into. I was the achiever, and I spent years trying to make sure my achievements didn't make her feel smaller. I don't think I always succeeded. I should have talked to her about it more directly. But I didn't, because I was busy, because I assumed she knew I loved her, because I thought the distance between us was just geography and adult life, and the ordinary drift of things. I didn't know she'd been sleeping with my husband for 13 months. My attorney told me that afternoon when she called back with the preliminary findings from the financial forensics team. They had identified 2 accounts opened in my husband's name in the Cayman Islands in March. They had mapped the routing structure, and they had identified a secondary signatory on one of the transfer authorizations, my sister's name, signed digitally, on a document that had moved $340,000 in August. She hadn't just known about it, she had participated. I went to the bathroom and stood over the sink for about 3 minutes. I looked at myself in the mirror. Then I went back to my desk and finished the afternoon. My attorney asked me not to go home. I went home anyway. Not because I was reckless, because I had made a decision. The final transfer had been scheduled for 3 o'clock. My account was frozen at 11:47 a.m. The transfer would bounce with no explanation sent to my husband. The system notification goes to the account holder, which is me, not him. He'd be monitoring the receiving account, not mine. He might not realize something was wrong until morning. I needed one more night of him not knowing that I knew. I needed him comfortable and unguarded. I needed him to stay. So I went home and made pasta. I poured 2 glasses of wine. I sat at our kitchen table and talked to my husband about his day, and he talked to me about mine, and he kissed me on the cheek when he cleared the dishes and said, "I love you," before he went upstairs. I sat at the table alone for a few minutes after I heard the water turn on upstairs. My father once told me, "When you catch someone in a con, don't tip your hand until you're ready to collect." He learned it the hard way when a contractor defrauded him out of $40,000 on a job, and he confronted the man too early, and the man disappeared before the check could be recovered. My father never saw that money again. He never forgot the lesson. I had my attorney. I had the forensics team. I had a frozen account and 18 months of documented forged authorizations. I needed one more thing. I needed my husband to attempt the transfer again in the morning, when the failure would trigger an automatic federal escalation flag. So I went to bed, and I slept, which surprised me. 4 hours, no dreams. It felt like a mercy. At 8:23 the following morning, my husband attempted to reroute the blocked transfer through an alternate account he'd opened 6 weeks prior. The attempt triggered the escalation. The Financial Crimes Unit forwarded the flag to the FBI because the Cayman routing made it an international wire fraud matter. I was already sitting in my attorney's office when she called to tell me. At 9:05 a.m., my sister walked into our bank branch on Colorado Boulevard with a power of attorney document, a forged one, as the forensics team had confirmed the previous night, and presented it to the branch manager, demanding to liquidate the remaining balance in person on my behalf. My husband had sent her. When the digital transfer failed and he couldn't reach anyone at the receiving institution, he'd called her in a panic and told her the account had been flagged and she needed to handle it in person. She had driven 40 minutes across town with a fake legal document, walked in wearing her good coat, and handed it to the teller with complete confidence. The branch manager had been briefed. My sister was detained in the back office while they waited for law enforcement. She sat in a chair with a paper cup of water and her phone, and she called my husband 4 times in 11 minutes. He didn't answer any of them. He was already on the phone with his own attorney. He came home that evening and found me at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. My phone was face down in my lap, recording. Colorado is a one-party consent state. My attorney had confirmed it twice. He knew something was wrong the moment he came through the door. I could see it in the way he moved, that careful, assessing stillness that settles over a person when they're reading a room without wanting to appear to be reading it. He had always been good at that. I had always mistaken it for attentiveness. "Long day?" I said. "Longer than expected." He set his bag down. "Yours?" "Productive." He poured himself a glass of water, stood at the counter with his back to me for just a beat too long. "There was a system alert on the investment account," he said. "I've been dealing with it." "I know," I said. He turned around. "I froze the account yesterday morning," I said, at 11:47, after I called my attorney. The face he made, I've thought about it many times since. It wasn't rage, not at first. It was something more stripped down than rage. Something like a person stepping off a curb and realizing mid-fall that the ground is much farther down than they thought. "Listen," he started. "Don't." The word came out flat and final. I hadn't planned the tone, it just happened. "Don't." Silence stretched between us. "You were never going to find out," he said eventually. The routing was clean. There was no way to trace it unless someone specifically went looking, and you never looked. "You're right," I said. "I trusted you." "You handed me the trust paperwork." There was an edge now, not guilt. Something harder. You handed it to me across the kitchen table and said, "Thank you. $2.3 million that your grandfather left you because you happened to be born first. You didn't earn that." And you did. I built our life here. He sat down across from me like we were about to have a reasonable discussion. The network, the house, the reputation, all of it runs through me. And I was supposed to watch you inherit more money than I've made in 15 years and just take my management fee. Say thank you? He shook his head. That's not how it works. You forged my name on 47 transfer authorizations, I said. That's federal wire fraud. The FBI opened the case this morning. The reasonable expression disappeared. My sister is at the police precinct right now answering questions about the power of attorney she presented to the branch manager today, I continued, which was also forged, which you sent her to execute. He was quiet for a long moment. She made her own choices, he said finally. She did, I said, and so did you. I called the police from the kitchen. He sat at the table the whole time, very still, and didn't run. I think by that point he understood there was nowhere left to go. My sister cooperated fully. She gave a 20-page recorded statement and testified before the grand jury. She had genuinely not understood, she said, how far it had gone. She had known about the transfers. She'd signed the August authorization, believing it was a legitimate account, restructuring that my husband had walked her through in careful, plausible language. She hadn't known the other signatures were forged. She hadn't understood the offshore structure. She hadn't asked enough questions because she hadn't wanted to. That last part was in her formal statement, on the record, and I read every word of it 3 times in my attorney's conference room. She said she loved him. That was in the statement too. I don't know what she felt. I know what she chose. Both things are real. There was one more detail that came out during discovery. The forensics team had requested access to my husband's personal email as part of the federal case. In his draft folder, never sent, but saved and revised repeatedly, which the investigators told me is a common pattern in financial fraud cases, perpetrators revising their plans obsessively. They found a document he'd titled simply Next. It was a financial projection, formatted like a business plan. Column A was labeled with my name, a timeline from the trust vesting date to an estimated divorce filing, approximately 8 months out. Asset recovery projections, everything itemized. Column B was labeled with my sister's name, her age, her estimated inheritance from our father, a paid-off house and a retirement account the document valued at approximately $780,000, listed as primary beneficiary. The Column B timeline began 6 months after the Column A divorce filing. He had intended to marry my sister, not because he loved her, because she was the next asset on the list. I found out about this document at 2:30 on a Friday afternoon in November, sitting in my attorney's conference room with a federal investigator and a cup of coffee gone cold. I sat with it for a while. The investigator was quiet. My attorney was quiet. He was going to do it again, I said. That's what the evidence indicates, the investigator said. I thought about my sister sitting in the bank with her paper cup of water, calling his phone over and over while he didn't pick up. I thought about how long she'd let herself believe that he had chosen her, how much she'd needed to be chosen. She didn't know until the trial. I was sitting 3 rows back in the gallery when the prosecutor introduced the document into evidence, and the defense attorney read the column headers aloud for the record. I watched the color leave her face. She looked, for just a moment, exactly like she had at 11 years old, standing at our mother's grave in a coat too thin for November, holding my hand and not making a sound because she didn't know yet how to cry without being embarrassed about it. I didn't feel satisfaction. I want to be honest about that. I felt something more like grief. The particular grief of watching someone you love understand, all at once, that they have been used. My husband was convicted on 7 federal counts, including wire fraud, bank fraud, and aggravated identity theft. He was sentenced to 14 years at a federal correctional facility outside Colorado Springs. There is no parole in the federal system. He will not be in a position to build anything else for a very long time. My sister accepted a plea to a single count of document fraud. 2 years of supervised release, 200 hours of community service. The court acknowledged she had been manipulated, though the judge was careful to note that manipulation does not erase the choices a person makes inside it. She called me from a parking lot after sentencing. I answered, which surprised me almost as much as it surprised her. "I keep trying to explain it to myself," she said. "I can't." "You wanted someone to choose you," I said. Silence. "That's not an excuse," I said. "No," she said, "it isn't." We didn't say much after that, but it was something. It's been 14 months since I sat in a parking garage and couldn't make myself walk inside. I sold the house in January, bought a condo on the east side of Denver with mountain views I actually look at now because I have time to look at them. I still go to work every day. I still close deals. I still forget things on the kitchen counter with reliable frequency. My attorney recovered $1.9 million through the federal asset forfeiture process. The remainder is still tied up in the offshore structure, which will take years to unwind. I'm not holding my breath. I'm also not giving up. When I finally told my father everything, the whole of it, from the charger to the courtroom, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I knew it the first time I shook his hand. Too much polish." 7 words. I told him he'd been right and that I should have listened, and he said, "You listened when it counted." I go back to that. I keep returning to it. Here is something people don't tell you about betrayal at this scale. It doesn't just shake your trust in the person who did it. It shakes your trust in your own perception. I spent months asking myself how I had missed it, how someone who prides herself on being the observant one, the careful one, the one who pays attention, could have failed to see what was happening inside her own accounts, her own home, her own marriage for 18 months. The answer, as far as I can work out, is this. I trusted him not because I was naive, but because trust is what you extend when you love someone. It is not a flaw. He exploited something that was real and good. That's on him, not on me. I am done letting his cruelty make me ashamed of having loved him. I run 3 miles every morning along the Highline Canal, which is beautiful in ways I never noticed when I was busy being someone's wife and never slowing down long enough to look at the water. My sister and I text occasionally. Nothing significant, a news article sometimes, or a photo of something we both would have found funny 10 years ago. I don't know yet if we will ever be close again. I don't know if that's something I want, or something that would be good for me. I'm still working that out. Here's what I know. I forgot my laptop charger on a Tuesday morning in October. I went back inside to get it and heard 2 people I loved discussing how to take everything I had built. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I drove to work and made 1 phone call and went home that night and made dinner and waited. By the time my husband realized the account was frozen, it was already over. People ask me what the turning point was. They want a dramatic moment, a confrontation, a single decision that contained the whole story. There wasn't one. There was just a woman sitting in a parking garage, staring at a clock, deciding that she was not going to let this be the ending. That barely sounds like a choice. It barely felt like one. But it was the most important one I ever made, and I am still here, which is everything.